Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you making the trip all the way up here and for your willingness to have this conversation with me and share everything that you know that there is about love as well as about your harp business and the history of harps. Maybe we can talk about as well.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So we're just going to start off simple. And since there are two of you, if you want my to take your coat off, I'm going to do the same thing actually because I had it on for you. If one of you wants to answer, you don't have to both answer the question. If one of you wants to answer the question or whoever feels pulled to answer, that would be great. So where were you born or where did you grow up?
Well, we're both originally from California. I grew up in Palo Alto.
You did.
And as you know, I went to Sonoma State, as you did, maybe 10 years before you. But
yeah.
And then Sharon grew up in Southern California.
Okay.
In the San Fernando Valley.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm from Orange County originally.
Oh,
Yeah.
His brother lives in Orange County.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's where all of my family is down in Orange County. I'm the only person that's all the way up in Oregon.
Lucky you.
It's real pretty. So you went to Sonoma State. Did you also go to school in California?
I went to San Jose State and then Chico.
Oh, that's right. You went to Chico. We were talking about that last night. Okay, so I lived in San Jose, downtown, and then we moved to San Francisco. And then when I went to Chico State for 1 year, and then I think I lived there a year and a half. And I was there in 93, maybe. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and I loved Chico.
It's a beautiful
years earlier. Beautiful campus. It's a really pretty, and it's got a great English department, which was also useful to me.
I was in the art department.
You were?
Yeah. And the house we lived in was right across from Bidwell Park.
Yeah. Oh, was it really?
Yeah, it was great.
Bidwell Park is so pretty.
Yeah.
I miss it. I went and visited maybe 3 or 4 years ago, driving up from San Francisco. Oh, I guess it's got to be longer than that, probably 6, but right before the fire.
Yeah, very nice.
That's bad.
Like literally a month, maybe a couple weeks before. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was a couple weeks before. And then when I was moving my ex-husband up from San Francisco, the fire started. And we saw it off in the distance as we were driving up on the 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, devastating. There have been so many.
There have been so many. I'm so grateful to live in Oregon where we have theoretically more water, but, we're starting to dry up as well.
That's right. Well, we were just, like Dave's shirt shows, we were just at Brighton-Bush where there was a huge fire, the Lion's Head fire.
Yes.
And they're recovering.
Just devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what brought you to Oregon?
Well, I also had an ex, and he was in school for Forest Service.
Oh.
Well, he was a geologist, just like me.
Well, I guess so, yeah.
Oh, you were a geologist?
I was a geologist,
I loved geology in Sonoma State. That was one of my favorite classes.
Oh, yeah.
It was so good.
Guys.
I wonder if you had the same professor.
I wonder. I'd have to look back on my transcript. I have no idea at this point who they were.
Well,
but
my ex got a job at the Sweet Home Ranger District.
Oh, cool.
So we were there for 10 years. And then we just decided to split. It was time. And I moved to Corvallis, and I met him within a month.
Isn't that interesting how the universe just kind of opens up, once one chapter ends, and then, yeah.
I really see my ex as the vehicle to have gotten me here. Of course, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But it got me here, got me to Dave.
Yeah.
And playing the harp.
Yeah.
And loving that.
Yeah, it was just one chapter.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, okay. Let's segue into name something you cannot live without.
Well, I think each other is probably the first thing. Although we know that in the next 20, 25 years, one of us may be living without the other.
Yeah.
But I would say second thing would be my harp.
Uh-huh.
Of course, there's our daughter as well.
Well,
there's a lot of things.
I think for me, it's nature.
Oh,
I
yeah,
just would have a
sure.
really hard time.
being
We're very
confined.
lucky where we live.
It's everywhere.
We can just walk out the door and
You
go
step
for a
into it.
walk, and it's beautiful trees, and we have a river in our neighborhood, and
That's amazing.
it's really nice.
I have a creek
Yep.
and a urban forest right across the street. I probably should have told you that this morning. But yeah, it's just across the street.
Yeah,
That's
we
why
noticed
I
it's a
love-
really nice area.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel very, very fortunate to live where I live.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I spent my 30s in San Francisco, and it was very different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't that great for me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do well without nature myself.
Mm-hmm.
So without the accessibility, I just had a fire escape with some plants on it, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah.
quite the same. So I understand, and I really love the sound of water, which is why
Oh,
there's
yeah.
a pond in my backyard
Sure.
with a waterfall. I'd love to live next to a river. That'd be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it does something to the brain. Yeah, the trickle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, okay, great answers. Tell me something unique or interesting about you that only those close to you would know.
Well, something that Dave tells me often is that my life has just gone by, and I just grab onto whatever is happening to me or in my life and run with it.
She's a very go with the flow kind of person. And it's interesting, we were talking about it just yesterday as
Yeah.
we were driving here from Brighton Bush Hot Springs, that I'm more of a planner. I mean, it's funny. She's way more organized than I am. I'm a bit scattered, but it's
like
all up
plans.
here. I
Gets
get
the
it
job
done. But
Definitely.
sometimes I have to be reminded a lot. But I am very much of a,
Planner.
in my life, I've always had a plan.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm an instrument builder. That's something that I wanted to do since I was about 15.
Really?
I was exposed to, I was very lucky when I lived in Palo Alto. A couple guys opened up a vintage instrument shop that was on my paper route. And my best friend and I, his brother was a really good guitar player, and we both thought, geez, guitar, everybody plays guitar. And we had heard records of people playing mandolin and went, hey, let's play mandolin. And it's kind of funny. I had this best friend who we did everything together. And we were both kind of outcasts. And this store opened up, and we found out that, they had all these cool old instruments, and they had a jam session every week. And we'd go to the jam session. And one night the guy handed me a mandolin he'd built, and he goes, here, try this. And I just thought, wow, that's so cool. I want to do that. So this was like a long-term dream of mine that I really didn't know was gonna ever happen. I studied geology. I got a master's degree. I worked for a big oil company doing geothermal exploration.
Oh my
which
goodness, what a
brought me to
different
Brighton
life.
Bush.
Okay.
And, just kind of as the industry spy. And then I finished my master's. The company didn't hire me, and I had some money saved and decided, I'm going to do this instrument thing, see if I can make that work. And then I met her. And I really didn't want to move to Houston or Anchorage or wherever, LA, where the oil industry is. And I really didn't want to work in the oil industry. And I met her, and she just has this uncanny luck. She goes with the flow, and it seems to me anyway, she's just blessed with good fortune. So we were talking about this yesterday, that I get that through her, the good fortune thing, where I'm more of a planner. She's a like, oh, this will work, and I'm
The
in
intuitive
awe
feminine.
of how well it works for her.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess at this stage, things are going very nicely. And I still plan in my mind, like what I'm doing for the next few months. But most of the organizing is her
It's
job.
still her.
And I get to just, do my craft and make that happen.
I had no idea that you were interested in building them all the way back when you were a teenager. That's amazing.
Well, these things, some people have dreams of whatever, owning a horse or,
astronaut,
going to the moon,
policeman.
and I tell you, when I was a kid, it seemed equally daunting to going to the moon that I would ever make a living making instruments. I just wanted to make a mandolin. I thought that'd be cool. And my mandolin teacher encouraged me. He goes, "Oh man, you could do that." I love it, And I didn't really think I could, but I got the opportunity, and I made a mandolin. I made a hammered dulcimer, and I was working in this shop at Oregon State called the Craft Center, and the director of the Craft Center said, "Wow, you should teach a class in stringed instrument building." And I said, "I've only made 2 instruments." And it was great. She goes, "Well, it's called experimental college. It could be an experiment." And I thought, well, this way I'll have 10 students. I'll supervise 10 projects and I'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
So I did that. I did that for a couple of terms and then just taught general woodworking there because she wanted me to. And it was my way of getting access to the shop for free because obviously I wasn't making any money.
Right.
And it turned out to just be my lifetime passion.
Well, and in the class, somebody wanted to make a harp.
Right. Yeah. So first class, a guy comes in and he says, "Yeah, I was down at the Lark in the Morning camp and I met this harp maker." And it's funny because that's down in Mendocino. And the harp maker lived on the Russian River where I had just been living. So I went down to visit my family and some friends down there. And I went to see the harp maker, Chris Caswell, who was one of the best harp makers at the time. At the time, there were maybe 2 or 3 harp makers in the U.S.
That's unbelievable.
Doing folk harp. We're not talking classical pedal harp. This is more like the Irish harp.
Yes.
And
about 1980 to 84, somewhere in there.
Yeah, maybe somewhere in there, 82 maybe.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was, like I said, I was down visiting and called him up and said, "Hey, could I come over and visit your shop?" And at the time, I didn't really understand, but he was like, "Well, you'd have to come at lunchtime because otherwise we're working." And now I get it. It's a lot of work. But I went, he was very kind, showed me around the shop. I saw the way their setup worked, and I thought, I could do that. And I came back, went to the Craft Center and made a harp. Didn't really know what I was doing. I think I copied a picture out of a book, but it worked. And eventually I sold it. I think I maybe got $500 for it. And the guy still has it. And this is 30 years later. He brought it back to me to have me update it. And I look at it and I go, man, that for 30 years old, this thing's
really
in pretty
40
good
years.
shape.
Really 40
well, now
years.
it's 40 years, but when he brought it to me, it was 30. Anyway, I was
You last forever.
Well, with a little TLC.
Yeah.
Stringed instruments, they're under a lot of tension. Harps particularly, a lot of tension. There's a lot of strings.
Yeah.
So they do occasionally need adjustment and care.
Yeah.
In the worst case scenario, in if they're really poorly cared for, they fall apart.
Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of antique harps that work. They kind of self-destruct. And I know of several people who have restored harps that are 100-year-old instruments.
Yeah.
And they get them working for a while and then they fall apart again.
Okay.
So unlike violins, which can last hundreds of years, there just aren't very many. There's examples in museums. they're not strung up to work.
Yeah.
They're on display.
Yeah.
So it's a little different that way.
Because there's so much tension on the instrument.
Yeah, like
on the wood.
Yeah. So like
And
our
all
harp
of the seams.
with 5 octaves of strings,
Yeah.
there's about 1,200 pounds of tension. And the whole thing is held together with glue.
Right.
So we've had a few where somebody took one to Belize and it's really hot and humid. And the glue, I don't know what attacks the glue, if it's just the moisture or if there's like bacteria get in there or whatever.
Yeah.
But, it started coming apart at the seams.
Wow.
And she sent it back to me and we fixed it up and told her not to take it back to Belize. And,
No harps
and I
in
think she wound
Belize.
up selling it because she went back
She
to
went to
Belize.
Belize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in most climates, yeah, they let. I mean, I always keep my fingers crossed, but at this point, I've been doing it for 40 years, and as far as I know, they all still work. I know there's a few that need some work, but I'm pleased that mostly, these 30 and 40-year-old instruments are still working, and I think that, if they last another 20 years, I'm good.
Yeah. So how many do you think that you've made at this point? Do you have any idea?
Yes, we know exactly.
What is it?
As far as instruments go, it's 1,823.
And we were just up at
Are
Breckenbush.
you serious?
Yeah.
We
Somebody,
have little stickers in every instrument he built, and the next one will be 1824.
so somebody did the math in their head
Oh,
recently and said, that's like 9 days a piece. And it's true. For at least 25 years, I had a part-time assistant, and we made an average of 50 instruments a year.
Some years it
And-
was 75.
Yeah, there were years where we really worked hard, and these days it's more like 30 because I'm doing it all by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't want to really work that hard anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. At a certain point, I feel like we all kind of want to relax a little.
I work hard, but I work less. I do take more time
in between.
to go walk the dog out in the nature, and down by the
or go to
river, and you go to Brighton Bush, and come here, visit
get
you.
some nature, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I appreciate you coming up. So let's see. Is there anything else that you're naturally gifted in that you want to share?
Well, I mean, Sharon is definitely naturally gifted at music.
It sounds like.
I think she she writes a lot of music. She composes a lot. And when the muse visits, you can't stop her. She just goes and goes and goes with this stuff. For me, I feel like music, I love music, and it's always been something I enjoy in a social context. Like I started out playing mandolin. Solo mandolin doesn't really cut it. You want to play with people.
Yeah.
And for me, I was kind of a shy kid, and music gave me an opening to have something to do in a social context.
Okay.
And it's an incredible gift because I think for myself, I do have a good ear, but I think I kind of had to work at it to get where I got. But I've always enjoyed hanging out with my friends and playing tunes. And I've gotten to meet incredible lifelong friends through music.
What are all the instruments that you play?
Well, I play mandolin and guitar, and the mandolin, there's lots of variations on that and on that tuning.
Uh-huh.
So more recently I picked up tenor banjo, which is tuned I tune it an octave lower than the mandolin. And so it's just easy for me because I already know where all the notes are.
Yeah.
I play guitar, which I started playing at the age of 12. And I just, my mother's cousin came back from overseas and her husband was playing guitar. I just said to my mom, I want to do that. So I took lessons for years and played guitar. And then in my 30s, I picked up the stand-up string bass.
That's right.
And we were in a band called the Swing Beans for about 10 years. And that's one of our connections to Brightonbush, was we played New Year's Eve there for quite a number of years.
That's fun.
And then when we had a child in 1992, and when she went to preschool, that's when I picked up playing the harp.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you've been playing the harp since 1992, so that's...
1996.
Oh, 1996.
Yeah, when she went to preschool.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, okay. So the math
And I
on
never
that...
dreamed I was going to play the harp.
And the funny thing was I was building them because when I finished helping this first student build a harp,
Yeah.
it opened my eyes to the fact that there was a lot of demand for
Harps.
folk harp. And like I said, there were like 3 guys in the U.S. building them that I knew of.
Are there more
And,
now?
oh, there's maybe 20.
Okay.
It's still a very, small
Niche
niche.
market.
Yeah. And I think partly because of that, we're all friends. Like we go to harp conventions and the harp makers all go out together and talk shop or tell jokes or, we have a good time. We're all pals. We do compete with each other, but there's a big enough demand
Yeah.
that we're all busy.
Yeah.
And for me, I always was interested in making the best instrument I could. And so my instruments are kind of at the high end. And some of the guys, they aim at the low end. They want
Yeah.
that entry level market.
Yeah.
And so we all do something different. We really don't copy each other very
Right.
much. We might see a feature that we like and go, oh, hey, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And I've stolen ideas from competitors, and then they say, well, that's fine,
Yeah.
glad you liked it. We're very, very cordial group.
Yeah.
And I also am a member of a group called the Guild of American Luthiers, which was started, almost 40 years ago. And they put out a quarterly magazine, and the whole thing, it's mostly guitar makers, some violin makers, and the whole group, the mission is to share information. And the violin world is a little more secretive, like they all have their own little varnish recipe or their own little secrets, and they're not real open about it. But in the guitar world and the mandolin world, you can't shut these guys up, including me. And we have these meetings. They're based in Tacoma, so it's easy for me to participate if I want to.
Yeah.
And they have these conventions, and everybody exhibits their instruments, and we go around and talk shop, and they're just very open and like I said, they share information. So I've gleaned all kinds of tips, ways of doing things that would have taken me years and years and years to figure out on my own. And thanks to the Guild, it's like, the quarterly magazine comes out, we turn off the machines and read the magazine, and there's always something in there. We go, what a good idea.
Huh.
So I'm fortunate that way.
Yeah,
and
you're
then,
still learning. It's amazing.
In the harp world, they have a group. It's called the International Society of Folk Harpers and Craftsmen. And they also put out a quarterly magazine called the Folk Harp Journal. And in the early days, there was a lot of information on building the instruments. Now it's a lot more about playing the instrument, and they publish a lot of music in the magazine.
Oh, cool.
So it's very nice that way, and we all advertise in it. There's less about building the instruments these days because a lot of us are pretty established. There's a better supply. Back in the early days, everybody was trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And, I was fortunate to get on board when it was, there was still a lot of information.
So that was lucky, wasn't it, Dave?
Yes. Yes. Well, I feel like a
also have
lucky
good
guy, let me
you
tell you.
have some good timing as well.
Yeah.
And your instruments are beautiful. They
Thank you.
are inlay. You have beautiful inlay work.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really spectacular. And also the choice of woods is really spectacular.
Well, that's the fun part is as much as the real core goal is to make a great instrument. But people often say, well, you're an artist. And I don't really feel like an artist. I'm a craftsman. Mm-hmm. And the goal is to make something functional. Mm-hmm. But I did take a course in the inlay and learned how to do that. And I do like working with beautiful wood and trying to make them as attractive as possible. And part of that is, at least when I first started out, I learned that, well, if you use really beautiful wood, it's a lot easier to sell.
Yeah.
But now it's just what I do. I want to make it look great.
Yeah.
Well, and
especially when people are owning them for 40 plus years, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And to see them,
you
could look at thorharp.com.
Yeah. Well,
we're
we're going to put all your information below.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
people can find it.
For about 15 years, we sold wholesale to harp specialty shops, and probably there were maybe 12 of those over the years that we worked with. And one guy down in Texas, he wrote up this little thing about choosing a harp, and his wife is the harp player, and they ran a store down there. And he wrote this thing, and he said, choosing a harp is like choosing a mate. You're probably going to spend more time with your arms around your harp than you are around your partner. And it's kind of true. And, so people are, customers often say, well, the most important thing to me is the sound. And I agree, but don't underestimate that it needs to be beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think it's equally important that it's this thing that when you walk in the room, you just go, oh, yeah.
And also the feel of it.
Well, sure.
It can sound good, but it may not feel right in your arms.
Yeah.
So that's...
those three things.
It's a big instrument to wrap around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to have up against. Well, so is a stand-up bass.
Yes, it is. I feel like when I play the bass, I'm dancing with it.
You're shorter, right? Aren't you on the lower end of 5 foot?
Oh, I'm 5'3".
Yeah.
5'3".
Yeah. So
you're that half in there.
Yeah. So you were dancing with it for sure. Yeah, that's fun. Well, all right. Either of you, what did you love doing as a child?
Well, after I was 12, I would play the guitar from the moment I got home from school until dinner time, and then after dinner. I just played it all the time.
You were that obsessed with it.
I loved it.
Yeah, her mom said, oh, I never had to tell Sharon to practice.
Yeah.
It's got to be another lifetime for sure. You just absolutely adored it from the beginning. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, music was always a big thing. Me and my cousins and my sister, we would listen to music all the time. We would lip sync to the music in the garage. We would do shows for our parents. We would play games with the music. I would, once I was playing guitar, we were playing with a record player. I'd put the needle on and we'd listen and we'd write down the words. Now you just look them up online. And then you'd put the needle a little further and you'd write down the words, or with the cassette tapes, I guess you could do that.
Yeah.
But that wasn't when we were children. We only had the record players.
Right.
And then I remembered the first song that I ever figured out on my own on the guitar was Judy Collins' Someday Soon. You know that song? Maybe not.
I feel like I do.
Yeah.
I'm not going to attempt to sing it, though.
There's a young man that I know. His age is 21. Anyway, someday soon, going with him. Someday soon. There's a little attempt at singing.
When we were kids, the radio was the big deal.
Yes.
And even teenage, young adult years, music was so central to our generation and the whole, people talk about the 60s and really into the 70s. Music was central to the whole youth culture and resistance to the Vietnam War or whatever the issues of the day were. I remember going to a big peace march in San Francisco, and we got to Golden Gate Park, and all the great bands were on stage, one after another, playing music for this huge crowd. And then the political organizers would get up there and say, well, we're not going to end the war with music. And the crowd would go, yes, we are, and we kind of did. I mean, it
rallied us.
It rallied us. It was the thing that would get people to
tie
show
everyone
up
together.
and then I was a little young for the real hippie scene in San Francisco, but where I grew up in Palo Alto, I mean, all the kids I was friends with, their parents worked at Stanford as professors, real intelligent kids. And, I struggled to keep up with them, but our scene was, the guys who played guitar were the coolest,
Yeah.
And I was not athletic. My big brother was very athletic and I was the wimpy kid, but I found my people through playing music, you know?
So one of the things in my childhood was my dad played mandolin. My mom did too, but my dad did more, mandolin and harmonica. And when I started playing the guitar, we would go to the retirement homes and play for the residents there. And that was something that I did later on. Well, we have done that together, but there was this interim place where my dad was actually in a coma in about 1997. He was diabetic and older, and so I went down there with a little harp, and I played for him at the bedside some of the songs he knew, like Roll Out the Barrel and I've Been Working on the Railroad, things like that, and he woke up. And so for 4 days, he was awake while I was there. My sister came, and then when I went home, I called my mom to say that I had gotten home, and she said, well, Dad died today. And so the next day, I think it was, I went down to our local hospice and asked if it would be okay to play for patients.
Wow.
And so I started doing that for quite a long time. And they even helped me go through a training called Music for Healing and Transition.
Oh, wow.
And I learned more about playing at the bedside, kinds of music to play, what to play when, and, especially if somebody was actively dying. Most of the time, my patients were not. Most of them were still having conversations with me, and we would talk about what kind of music they liked, and I would play some things, spend time with them.
Yeah, you dedicated a lot of time towards playing that instrument.
Yeah, and then COVID kind of put an end to that for me for a while. I haven't gone back. And we were playing for retirement homes and nursing homes as well.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, we would do this. We had a 18-year gig of playing Christmas Eve at a restaurant in Corvallis. And
that's a long time.
It was. But every year you have to relearn all those tunes. And we had quite a list. So we would start learning the tunes, 1st of November, have a good month of
practice,
getting familiar with them and trying to, get it where we didn't need to be looking at the charts anymore. And then because that was a lot of work, we decided, well, let's go around and do the nursing homes and the retirement homes. They'll love it, which they did. We probably our steadiest gig there was a memory care facility where people had dementia. Some of them hadn't spoken in years. And when we played Silent Night, they all sang along. And that was really powerful.
Music is so healing.
It is.
And
it really
it's
is.
Weird. It's like there's a whole different part of your brain that processes music.
I agree.
And it seems to be like the last thing to go. I mean, other than the unconscious.
Yeah.
And it just, you go do this and you realize that you're bringing a gift to them, but there's a gift that you get back.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's really wonderful. Yeah.
You've touched so many people.
We try.
Yeah.
Another thing that I do is I write my music, music that I've arranged that are traditional tunes, but also the music that I've composed, and I put them in books. And so there's a lot of people that are out there playing my music.
That's so incredible.
Yeah. And one of my missions in writing my music out is making it playable so people can really access it.
When did you start composing music? Were you doing that as a child too?
I was.
I believe it.
I was. In fact, my cousin and I probably composed the first song that I ever wrote, and it was all about we're sitting in a chair because we did something wrong, and we're being punished for it. I kind of remember something about that.
Oh,
wow.
geez.
But anyway, that was the first song. But this same cousin, he was a little older than I was, and he's into statistics now. So
he's like a physicist or something.
Yeah, something.
A really brilliant
anyway,
guy.
As I was playing the guitar, he said to me, well, what is it that you're doing? You know, what makes that chord be that chord? And we charted out the guitar fretboard, and we looked at, when I played a G chord, oh, well, I'm playing all G, B's, and D's. And when I played a C chord, it was all C, E's, and G's. So that was my first entrance into theory. And learning about music, what's actually going on.
Yeah.
And that's been something I've really loved all along.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because that's usually the part that no one likes.
It is. I find it fascinating.
The funny thing about that to me is, like she figured this out when you were like 13 or something.
Yeah.
And I learned music more, not really by rote, but by ear. And
that's how
I was lucky. My best friend when I was a kid, he was quite a bit better at it than me, and so he'd learn something, and then he'd kind of show me, and then we'd go to these jam sessions where we were playing like bluegrass music
and practicing.
And I would sit on stand on the outside of the circle and just chunk the chords, And then I had a teacher who taught me some melodies. I did about 3 months worth of lessons. I'm way less structured in my learning than Sharon. But when I was in graduate school, you pay for a certain number of credits, and I was a teaching assistantship or had a teaching assistantship. So I had to take a certain amount of credits, but to do all science was way too hard.
Yeah.
So a lot of people would take thesis hours or research hours so that they had the credits, but it didn't really go towards your degree. And I thought, well, shoot, why not take some music theory? And they had a music theory for non-majors. And when I was doing bluegrass,
they had an incredible music section at Sonoma State.
They do, now. When I was there, I didn't do anything but what I had to do.
Right.
I mean, I was so immersed in the geology thing,
department.
And all the math and physics and chemistry that you had to do. That was hard enough.
Yeah,
and,
I bet.
And I, but in my spare time, I mean, I lived with a banjo player, and we lived in his mom's chicken coop in Katati. It was great. And we were immersed in this bluegrass world.
How did you live in a chicken coop?
Well, it was a really nice barn. It was all made out of redwood,
nice chicken coop.
and he lived in one end, I lived in the other. And
so chickens weren't in
no
there
chickens.
with you.
Yeah, the chickens were long gone.
Okay.
And they just had all this junk stored in there. And
so you cleaned it out.
He had just gotten out of the Army and was like, came home to roost. And his mom was really cool. She was a bohemian. His mom and dad, I never met his dad. He had passed already, but I just loved his mom. And
sounds like a great experience.
Her whole thing was living cheap, and she lived on Social Security, could barely pay the property taxes, so I got to live in the barn for $50 a month while I was in school, and And then all my spare time I spent hanging out with him, playing fiddle tunes on the mandolin, and we'd go to jam sessions or bluegrass festivals, and people would say, "Oh, this song's real easy. It's just a 1-4-5 in G." And I was like, "What the heck does that mean?" And then I took theory, and a wonderful professor. She was great. I loved her too. She was really encouraging, and it was a theory for non-majors, so a little bit easier. And it turns out it's really not very complicated. And this number system is very logical.
Yeah.
And later on, Sharon and I both went to the Puget Sound Guitar Workshop up in Port Orchard, I think. And there it's a camp. You stay for a week, and you take 3 classes a day from really great players. And I loved swing music, early jazz. So I'm in this, I played mandolin. I'm like, what am I doing at a guitar workshop? Well, they did have a mandolin class, but I took swing guitar, and she showed us these chords, 6 chord, major 7, minor 7s. And I realized this isn't that complicated. And on the guitar, it's like, I call them lazy chords. It's like you put your hand in a certain position, you move it around, and it turns into different things.
Yeah.
And I'm playing the guitar. People watch me play guitar and they think I'm a good guitar player, but really that I'm a one-trick pony. It's like, this is what I know. I kind of jumped in to playing guitar by playing swing, which is jazz, and it uses all these, what they call color chords, where there are actually 4 notes in the chord. That's what I learned first. When I started playing as an accompanist with the harp, I had to go back and learn the simple open position, C, F, and G that I learned when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I had to oh God, no, that's hard,
Yeah.
And now we've been at it long enough that it
comes more natural.
If you can just remember what to do, the fingers do it.
Yeah.
So in terms of writing music, I started when I was younger, and then I wrote a lot of, kind of folk songs. And then when we were in the swing band, I wrote a lot of swing style songs with lyrics. Now I'm more into melodies and just writing beautiful melodies.
Yeah. So I'll never forget, and for anyone who's listening or watching, I met these two by walking into Brighton Bush Hot Springs, and Sharon had her harp out, and so I heard it off in the distance, and then I started traveling down the path, and I was like, who is playing? And then I think there were 3, 4, maybe 5 of us around you at the time. It was pretty quiet, but you did start to grow more people as you played. And so, you're just so naturally gifted at it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm sure it takes practice. And I'm sure you've been doing it for a very long time, but you can just tell how much you love it. And you played some original music for me, which was really nice. Yeah. I did also look up your composition books.
Oh yeah,
on your website.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You have quite an entire collection.
Yeah, I think there's about 23 of them.
She's pretty prolific.
Yeah.
One of our favorite composers, because it's the harp, is a man named Turlough Carolyn, who lived in the 1600s, 1700s in Ireland.
Yeah,
he's the most famous.
He sounds Irish.
And there are over 200 tunes that he composed that people still play. And while I think that's really remarkable, and sometimes I wondered, really, was this really all done by one guy? And there's definitely a style.
No Netflix back then, Dave.
Yeah, well, I know. No, they didn't have it. They didn't have any of that. No,
no distraction.
And really, when Carolyn came to town, everybody was there. They loved it. But the remarkable thing is, none of this got written down until 50 years after he died.
Yeah.
And those tunes became part of the oral tradition in Ireland. Anyway, I think 200 surviving tunes is a really incredible body of work. But then I started thinking about how many tunes Sharon has written and put in these books, and I really don't have a number, but I think there's at least 85.
Yeah,
and and it's like, okay, people who compose music, people who tune in to the muse and follow through, because it's quite a process that she goes through.
I'm about to ask her.
And well, you'll get there. But anyway, it's I think it's
it is
people who are creative create. Yeah, and
Yeah.
So what is your process, Sharon?
Well, it does vary to some degree. Some tunes come a lot faster than others, but usually I'm just kind of playing around on the harp, maybe even making a mistake, and I go, oh, I like that sound. And so I play with it, kind of a motif, and then I'll usually develop it in some way. Sometimes I'll play with it and it repeats, and then I'll try to play it in a new way, maybe going backwards instead of it going down. I'll take those notes and go up, or go to a whole different set of notes, but maybe the same intervals. Sometimes I've composed a song, like one was a lullaby I composed for a friend's new baby. His name was Alaric. So I took the letters of his name and assigned them numbers, like through the alphabet, and then took those numbers and made a little melody out of them. And sometimes you have to, because maybe something doesn't sound quite right, so you adjust it, but that's the inspiration. Another one I did was when we were sailing up in Canada, we kept running into the numbers 4, 5, and 1, which actually is like your 1, 4, 5 tune. But I don't know, I think it turned around to 4, 5, 1.
You should look up the angel number for that.
Oh, maybe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I took the chords, and I think I start with the 4 of the melody, then go to the 5, and then back to the 1. And then I even took the 4th note, or something like that.
So it's
maybe
mathematical
4, 5,
for you.
1.
well,
Well,
sometimes.
kind of. I
Sometimes.
just take the numbers and play around with it. And if I like the sound, then I develop it in further. And then other times it just
Comes right out.
Yeah.
And so, on average, how long does it take you to compose a song? I mean, I'm sure it's different and varying depending on what you're working on, but is this like, does this take you weeks and weeks or months or?
Well, sometimes I would say probably about a week if I'm working on it.
Okay.
There's others that I start and then put aside, and then I'll
come back,
or I'll just have one little thing. Like one time I was on the phone on hold, and there was this thing going on the phone with some melody that I thought, wow, that's really neat. So I figured out what it was. I was actually, while I was on hold, I was playing with the with the music.
That's cool.
I haven't done anything with that one yet, but
Okay.
we'll see what happens.
Interesting.
Well, the question of how long does it take to compose,
Yeah.
it's like, to get the gist of the tune, it could happen in 20 minutes, or
Yeah.
like you said, it might take a week.
Yeah.
But when it comes to writing it up and publishing it, she
a whole
goes
other process.
over and over and over
I'm
and
sure.
over.
Because I want to make
And-
sure it's playable.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the thing about the harp is the fingerings. Like a lot of the really great players that recording artists that we are familiar with, most people aren't. They write stuff that's just way too hard. And people go, oh, God, I love that song. And they get the sheet music, and they could work their whole lives and not be able to play that because the person who wrote it is outstanding. And the stuff that Sharon publishes, it has to be something that
Most people can
falls
play.
right under your fingers. She has one book called Where the Fingers Fall, and envisioned the cover artwork being kind of this horror show of fingers falling out of the sky. But that's the way my brain works. But she really does. She works on these things for months before they go to publication. And then we get emails from people that, oh, I got your book and I just love it. I went and played all the tunes, and could just sit down and play them. And I think, again, there's a little market niche that somebody needs to do. And it really works for her.
I'm glad to do it.
Yeah. You've sold something like, I don't know,
I always
10,000 books or something.
If I can
it's
play
crazy.
it, then anybody can play it. But that's not always true, because I do have students and sometimes they struggle. And when they're struggling, I just say, well, let's figure out, where do your fingers want to go? So let's change it around and make it work for you. And I think that really works.
You sound like a fun teacher. You're very flexible. Okay. I have so many questions. You've answered a lot of them. So what is one of your earliest memories of feeling love?
Well, one of the memories that I just remember love was when we had our baby. And I think that what I got from that was how much my parents loved me, because of what I could feel, the love for our baby.
Well, I'd have to agree with that one. Some of the most powerful was holding that baby. I remember at the Oregon Country Fair, sitting behind the booth with the baby, and sitting in the sun while you guys were all out front taking care of business. And just going, oh man, this is unbelievable. And
almost brings tears to my eyes right now.
As a kid, for me, that's a hard question, because I was the third kid, had an older brother who kind of bullied me. My sister would take whichever side was beneficial to her. I think, obviously I felt it from my parents, because I'm not that scarred, like somehow I got over it. But as a kid, I really struggled. And I think when I think back, I think doing projects with my dad, like he was a real handyman. He was an engineer at HP. And we did stuff like, we built a couple of boats together. We did, we restored an old car. And it was kind of funny. In talking to my dad later in life, he said, you've got a real talent for working with your hands, and your brother doesn't. Everything he touched, he broke. And my brother had a real talent for making money, and he's, he's a happy camper now. But
that sounds like you've made some money too.
Well, I did okay. I did okay. Yeah.
75 instruments a year.
Yeah. I mean, it's been very rewarding in all ways, really. But as a kid, I really liked making things, fixing things. I remember, my grandma would give me, stuff that broke and say, well, if you can fix it, you can have it. And I as a teenager, I never said it, but I just thought, and if I can't fix it, you want it back. It's like, it's kind of goofy. But they all knew, that I was that kid who would sit in his room and put it back together, And, so I see that in my career, that this is something I've always liked doing. And
something that my mother said to me at some point, I guess we were talking about our teenage years or something like that. And my mom said, I always trusted that you would do what was right for you. And that just felt so good. And from that moment, I tried to do that for my daughter as well. Just know that she would do what was right for her.
Remind me, she's
31 now.
Okay,
Yeah.
31. I was trying to do the math.
Yeah, but she was probably about 4 at the time when my mother said that. Yeah, and that felt really good to know that she trusted me.
And she also was your biggest supporter, it sounds like.
Yeah, she was.
Yeah, it sounds like she cheered you on just like you've cheered your daughter on.
Yes.
Yeah, I understand. That's really amazing. I would agree with you. I mean, having my daughter was very, very, I mean, it goes down as one of the most difficult things that I've ever done, and also one of the most beautiful things that I've ever done.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. It's an incredible experience.
It is.
Yeah. There's nothing like it.
No.
Okay, let's see. Okay, you answered that. How old were you when you first fell in love? Do you remember?
Well, I remember, I don't know that it was love, but there was a boy that I was dating, whatever, I must have been 9th or 10th grade. And I remember when he broke up with me, how hurt I was.
Yeah.
So I don't know that was love, but...
you think it was more rejection than love?
Probably,
that you were hurt about?
Now to think about it,
Yeah.
but it surprised me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that what happened was that he had some experiences. He had gone to New York for a camp, and perhaps he had experiences that I wasn't ready for. And he couldn't go back. But I wasn't ready to go forward.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were young.
I was. Yeah.
Steve?
Well, for me, like I said, I was the kid that everybody picked on as a young kid. And I remember, when I was in, I think it was junior high, started hanging out with the Stanford crowd, and things were getting better for me socially, and the 9th grade graduation dance, I was interested in this one girl, and as were all the other guys. And this other girl just kind of glommed onto me. And I remember her mom came to pick her up, and she told me this later. Her first question was, "Is he Jewish?" Which I'm not, but that's been my pattern. All my serious girlfriends were Jewish, including Sharon.
Right?
Are you Jewish?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, I think it's because my parents named me David, it was fate. But, and I think at the time I thought I was in love. She thought she was in love. But I think the real answer to that question for me anyway is that the definition of what that means evolves as you go through life.
Boy, does it ever.
And
Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, when I was in college, I had another Jewish girlfriend, and I thought I was in love with her, but I was very young, and we both were, and didn't really know. I don't think we really knew what that was. I mean, we had a great time together and all, but I think really Sharon is the first one that, and only that we have this completely symbiotic relationship. We do depend on each other a lot, but we also...
You're independent.
We have...
Or interdependent.
We're interdependent.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time together. We run a business together from our home.
Yeah.
But I'm out in the shop all day, and she's in the house doing whatever she feels like doing. And but we do almost everything together, and really wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I have a group of guys that I've met mostly through music that they do a camp out every summer, and I like to go, but if it's a time where Sharon and I are going to have an opportunity to go backpacking together, I go backpacking with Sharon. And matter of fact, she's, we're all getting older and she's having trouble with her hip. And we did go backpacking this summer, one little trip. But I don't really want to go by myself. And I probably will if I have to, but because I really get a lot out of it. It really, it feeds my soul to be up in the mountains and, just love it.
Me too.
But, I think the notion of what that word love means, it takes on more and more meaning as you go through life. And, a big part of that is watching your parents expire and leave this world and get you realize how much you really love them when you're losing them. So, we're at that age where, we're not ready yet, but, you start like getting your things, trying to make things easier if you have kids. Like we have one daughter.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of stuff. And I have my shop. I have all these instruments I've collected. And it's just like, oh my God, poor Rosie. So you try to, make it as easy as you can.
Yeah.
Because you really care, And I think that's when you're young, you just don't know. And it feels good at the time. And then, maybe there's some conflict, or maybe it's just you're moving on with your life and you realize that you don't really want to be going in the same direction. And I think, what we have is pretty special. It's pretty rare that we've gotten through a lot, and it's never really been all that hard. I mean, there was maybe one little period. Yeah. We know what we're talking about. Yeah. But, and that was more about, how we were dealing with our daughter than it was about how we were dealing with each other.
Yeah.
And now we're through that and it's all good.
Yeah. So, okay, I was going to ask this, but we can just jump to it. So, how did the two of you meet?
That's a good story.
We were introduced basically by a mutual friend.
And this friend happened to be the one who wanted to build the harp in his
this guy...
Oh, interesting!
It's really weird. It's like...
synchronistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he was taking my class. We were building the harp together.
And I had met him independently out of playing music in Eugene.
Yeah.
I played a particular song called Waltzing with Bears, and he claims that he's the actual subject of that song because he's friends with the guy who wrote it. So that was kind of a special connection that we had, that I was singing the song about him, but I had no idea about that.
Wow.
But the funny part of the story is, in Corvallis at the time, there was a place called the Beanery, which was a coffee house that it was a local hangout. And, you could go there, buy a cup of coffee or not, and hang out, It was a really great little social center where, people would meet up and, whether they were discussing business or had political groups or whatever, people were, just get together with friends and over coffee, have a little, and they had this bench out front where we called it the
Group W.
No, it was just the Beanery bench. And it was just, and all the guys a lot of the people I knew, musicians, basically broke, would hang out, and we would, derisively call them Beanery bums, And so there I was sitting on the Beanery bench. I had finished my master's and hadn't found a job. And it was like the first time in my life where I didn't have a plan. And I was hanging out at the craft center trying to make my own harp after helping this guy Bob make his. And I was going to meet him there. And so I'm hanging out on the beanery bench, and where I got my cup of coffee, and I walked out the door and saw her, and thought, oh, she's new and pretty cute, and and then my buddy Bob comes out the door and he says, "Hey Dave, you want to go to Hoskins Pond? I got 2 girls," and she was one of the girls. So we went out to Hoskins Pond, which is out in the Coast Range, and it's a local skinny dip hangout. So the first meeting, we went skinny dipping together. And then on the way home, I got her number and pursued that.
Yeah.
And for me, obviously I thought she's beautiful, but the fact that she played music and was as intensely into it as I am was really a huge attraction, because in previous relationships, although, being in the band was maybe how I met some of the women that I hung out with, there was always this conflict of, do you have to go play music every Saturday night? And I remember this distinctly, my college girlfriend.
Why am I not more important to your music?
Well, my thing was like, well, what else do you want to do?
Yeah.
What? Sit around and watch Little House on the Prairie? Spare me, Yeah. And, for us at that time, young guys, sitting around playing music was a big party, and sometimes we'd even have the TV on and we'd hit the mute button and pick a tune while the commercials are on. And then we'd go back to watching Sergeant Bilko or The Honeymooners or, these old comedies.
That wasn't me.
No, that wasn't you. That was me and Paul.
Yeah.
And, and we're cracking jokes and we always had a great time.
Yeah.
And music was what we were doing, but really we were just hanging out.
Yeah.
And the fact that, I can understand now why she didn't want to do that. She's not a musician, know? So, although I think music was part of the attraction for her, to me, was I was a musician, but then it became this conflict. So I'd always thought, I got to find a girl who plays music, because then we won't have that conflict. Mm-hmm. Now, if we have conflict, it's about the music, not between us, but how we're going to play something, or whether we're going to, go do a gig or whatever.
Yeah.
We don't. It's we kind of got it worked out.
Yeah.
Now, but,
so music is the great connector.
Well, it's huge for both of us, and it makes it a lot easier to get along if you have common interests.
Of course it does. Yeah, of course it does. Okay, so how long have the two of you been together?
Since 1984.
Yeah, we're coming up on 40 years.
And it was our anniversary Friday.
Oh, happy anniversary!
33 years.
Yeah, we've been married for 33. Mm-hmm.
And we had our honeymoon at Brighton Bush, and so we were there at Brighton Bush.
So
let me tell this little story about that. We were in the hot tubs and mentioning that it was our anniversary. And they said, well, what are you going to do on your anniversary? And I said, well, we're going to play music. But we also got new cell phones just before we came. So somebody in the hot tub says, oh, 33 must be the cell phone anniversary. Like you have the silver anniversary, the copper, the diamond. So 33 is the new cell phone anniversary.
33 is a really important number, too.
Is it? Yeah. Numerology.
Yeah. And, it was a significant year for me. I don't know if you remember being 33, but...
Well, I met him when I was 32. Like I was just turning 33 that year.
Yeah,
so that makes
That's
a lot.
Right.
It was a huge
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, so what has been your greatest lesson in love?
Communication.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have conflict.
Of course.
And sometimes it gets kind of hairy.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, and I know this is really trite, but it's basically true. Can't do it always, but if you try not to go to bed being mad at each other, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I will say that sometimes we go to bed being mad and then we wake up and apologize.
Yeah.
I think if you have a good relationship, you're never really that mad at the person.
You're mad
it's
at
about
the
the
situation.
stuff. It's the situations. It's, you know, like just this morning, I'm trying to lock the car, and she's got her. You know, we got a Prius. It's got one of those smart keys. You know,
You can't lock the car with a key. In the car.
You know, we were just at Brighton Bush, and same thing there. I'm trying to lock the car, and the thing goes beep, and it won't let me because she's buried her key in her luggage somewhere, and I have to go rooting around. Oh yeah, it's on her purse, and you know, this morning at your house it happened again, and you know, it's like the third time this trip where I've had to root around looking for the key. And I was mad, you know. I was just like, God, every time, you know.
Yeah.
And it was great. I'm not real happy about the way she handled it, but it's pretty funny. She goes, well, if you hadn't have given me my car key back, that wouldn't have happened. So all of a sudden, it's my fault that I couldn't find her car key. Well,
although I wasn't trying to make it his fault, I was just looking for a solution.
Well, of course.
What happened was I was going to go out to get our coffee this morning, and he gave me the key to go out. But I never went out because I wasn't sure about the alarm on your door.
Oh, yes.
So I didn't go out. And so I think you were going to go out, and I gave you the key, and you said, oh, I already have one. So I went and put my key on my purse because I don't want to lose it. I put my purse in my backpack, and then he took all the stuff out at some point.
Right.
So, you know,
right.
it's kind of
and then
disconnected.
the purse wasn't in the usual spot, so I had to go back in and go, where's that?
Where's the usual spot?
In your other bag, you know. So it's the other two times. It's just, you know, and that kind of stuff. It's like for a moment I'm mad, and now we laugh about it. And that's something that we do a lot.
The other thing is laughter.
Oh,
communication and laughter.
And
we do that a lot with fights we have. We laugh about it later.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I agree.
And it's funny because, you know, through the years we've, and again, through, oddly enough, through music, we have some really dear friends, people we've known for 30 plus years, and funny stuff happens. Or we think's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe they don't.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
interactions.
Yeah.
And we joke about it.
Uh-huh.
And this one friend of mine was, I guess he'd had like kind of a reckoning with his brother, and you know, brought up a lot of old stuff. And so he was trying to get clear with other people in his life. And he brought up some stuff about us. And we were like, oh, yeah, we laugh about that all the time. And he was kind of offended. And,
Why was he offended?
well, you know, because we're laughing about this thing that he's very serious about. And for us,
life is not that serious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know,
there's a lot of serious qualities.
There's a lot of serious
life.
stuff in life, but you know, it's just a method that we have of not only getting beyond it, but actually making some of these things really memorable because we get a kick out of it. It's just funny, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really
key.
You hit it there.
Yeah.
It's, you know, if you can laugh about your tough times, then they lose all their power.
Oh, that's it.
You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Well, that was like in the Saving Brightonbush book, the statement about you have choices.
Well, everything is either baggage or fuel. You get to decide.
Choose, yeah.
I love that.
Choose. That was a quote at the very beginning of that book that Olivia wrote. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I think back to when I was a kid and all the other kids were picking on me, and And somehow I got over it. And I think what it was really is, as soon as I left home and went to college, I got to reinvent myself. Nobody knew that about me. And I don't suffer from that anymore.
Uh-huh.
And, I choose not to have that be baggage.
Uh-huh.
And I actually remember when I was in the Boy Scouts, that was a big part of my early, life. And
Were you an Eagle Scout?
no, I never got that far. I got to Star, which was like
Still
third one
far.
down.
Yeah.
But we were really into it, and we did a lot of camping and stuff. And at a certain point, I got to be a patrol leader. And see, I had an older brother, and we had a whole bunch of friends that were like two brothers, same age as us. Mm-hmm. And I was always under the
Watchful
under
eye.
the thumb of the older guys.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, they went on, and because my dad was willing to take us all on outings, I became a patrol leader, and I had a bunch of younger kids that were in my group. And one of my best buddies was also in that group. And I remember this one camp out where we were like creeping around and scaring the younger kids. And I thought, I don't want to do this. This is mean. And my friend Tim,
Because
he's
you
a
recognize
great
the
guy.
experience.
He got
in
it
the other
too.
person's
We
shoes.
were both like, that wasn't very nice. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be showing these kids how to have a good time. And this is like 12, 14,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just knew I
Yeah.
hated being on that end of things.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because I guess it's safe to talk about my dad. He's not around. He was a younger brother, and he would often tell me, well, my older brother used to pick on me. And as I thought about the way I was teased as a kid, I realized my dad started it.
Uh-huh.
And this is something you read about, that abusers often those who were abused turn into abusers.
Well, and it's also modeled and it's
modeled.
normalized.
Right. And
he's like, what's the big deal?
Yeah,
Because it
sure.
happened in my family.
Sure. Yeah. And it happened to me.
And it happened
and
to
I
me.
got over
and
it.
I got over it, so you should get over it too.
To be honest, my dad and my uncle, they loved each other.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw. And
Yeah.
it was a little hard for me to realize that, my uncle picked on my dad. I loved my uncle.
Yeah.
He was a great guy.
Yeah.
But he was one of those guys who always had nicknames for people. He was
it's
a
always
natural born
teasing.
salesman. He was just, I called him Uncle Ernie. And it was funny one time
I had an Uncle Ernie too.
one time I called him up. Anytime I was in Seattle, I was going to go see them. And his wife, my aunt, was just the sweetest person. And I get my Aunt Verna on the phone, and I said, "Hey, is Uncle Ernie there?" And she laughed, and she goes, "I go, this is your nephew David." She goes, "Oh, you really do mean Uncle Ernie. Everybody calls him that."
Oh, funny.
And that was the kind of guy he was.
Huh.
He had little nicknames, and he poked fun at people, but it was all out of affection, you know?
Yeah.
But as the little kid getting this your whole childhood,
Yes.
and then it went to all the other kids, and it wasn't always nice.
Yeah.
And I really suffered as a kid, and then it wasn't until I don't know, my dad was probably in his 70s that I realized, a lot of that stuff that my brother and sister did to me, they weren't old enough to make that up. They got that from Dad. And I don't hate him.
Yeah.
I love my dad.
Yeah.
So he just didn't know
Yeah.
that it was going to go where it went.
Yeah.
And my mom would crack me up, because, they were in their 80s, I think. And I'd come to visit, and my mom and I'd stay up kind of late talking. And she'd say, if we had known it was so bad for you, maybe we would have done something about it. And I just laughed. I was just like, how could you not know? I mean, I was the kid who was always crying, and their thing was like, if you wouldn't cry, he wouldn't hit you. And I just thought, God, man, make it be my fault. It's like, so,
my dad would say, stop being so sensitive, Andrea.
Yeah.
Or, just, let it go. Just let it go.
Right.
Just let it go.
And,
be a bigger person.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well,
sticks and stones don't break your bones.
All of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't really remember it, but I remember being told that my grandfather would say stuff like, "Can't you shut that kid up?"
I'm sure.
And it's like,
you were sensitive.
It really made him who he is today.
And I think it's true to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just like,
But you were also sensitive.
Right.
Whereas maybe your dad was also different generation, and potentially he was able to blow it off a little bit easier.
I think he probably went. I mean, he may not have.
He had a different personality.
Well, he did, and I think, deep down, he was a really good guy.
Oh, yeah.
Well, of course.
And I do think as a kid, it hurt his feelings to be told, those are my friends. Don't you be hanging around with my friends. And, and my uncle, broke stuff that my dad had made. I mean, my dad built a little robot. They grew up in Napa. And my grandfather's shop, he was a leather worker, was right on the Napa River.
Oh, cool.
So they had the river out back. And my dad built a little rowboat. And what does my Uncle Ernie do? He and his buddies hop in the rowboat,
and
go upstream somewhere, abandon the thing, and then come back. And my dad says, hey, where's my boat? And he goes, oh, I don't know. I mean, imagine you're a teenager. Yeah. And you built your own boat. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of work. Yeah. And then have your brother trash it for you,
Yeah.
So I think he pretty much went through the same thing I did.
I'm sure
and he
did.
Probably had a similar life experience of going away from home. I mean, it was the era of World War II. He was in the Navy. I think probably when he went in the Navy, he made new friends. They didn't know that about him.
Right.
He became a leader, and got over it.
Yeah.
Which is what happened to me. It's like I got over it.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd still like to smack my brother, but he'd hit me back, so it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
No, we have affection for each other.
Yeah.
But it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel really, really fortunate to have gotten over it to the degree that I have, because I know a lot of people who don't.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think it's because of the experiences I had away from home where I could reinvent myself.
And maybe you found somebody who loves you in a way that they filled in all of the places where you needed more love.
Well, no doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
And I think also, again, that era where you're raising a child and you realize, because our daughter was very sensitive as a kid. She went to a Montessori school at like 4 years old, and first conference with her teacher, who was a really very warm and caring person, he said, well, she's kind of quick to tears. And that was me, and I really made a huge effort to not tease her.
Oh, yeah.
And, now at 31, she lets me know that there were certain little things that we did that she took that way that was never intended that way.
Right.
But, that's, you can't be perfect.
Well, and also different realities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Different perceptions.
Sure.
She's a child, you're the adult.
Well,
your reality is one, hers is different, right?
Yeah.
What you mean and what she takes are two
Well, and
different
it's
things,
interesting
too.
because now, at 31, she understands us probably better than we understand ourselves,
She's been watching you for a bit.
Well, and it's interesting because she said recently that, I've noticed with you two that when you're presented with a challenging notion, by her, that it just takes you a little time to process it, and then you're okay with it, So whatever it is, at first it's like, oh, really? And then, okay. It usually takes a day, and actually she's appreciative of that, because a lot of her friends don't get along with their parents that well.
And you're all very close.
We're really close. And she lives around the corner from us, and she has a friend, she's a writer, and she has a friend that she basically met online through writing, and they
do that now.
Yeah. Anyway, this friend of hers, they've spent a lot of time together in actually together, not just online. They do talk to each other almost every weekend, and but her friend is like, came up to visit. She wants to get out of Texas. She just doesn't, it's too hot and the politics suck.
Yeah.
And she's like, came up to visit, and she's like, yeah, I want to meet your parents. I want to see what it's like to have parents that you actually like.
Yeah.
And Rosie's great. She's like, yeah, I want to show off my parents to my friends,
What do you think the secret is? I mean, I know.
It's respect.
I know from my perspective, but I'd love to hear
It's
you.
respect. I'm real
what
quick
think.
to say that because...
Mutual respect.
Well, I think it starts with the parents. It's like, as a kid, when she's a kid, you're trying to shape their lives and show them, you try to show them the things you love, and they don't necessarily wind up loving those things.
Right.
But and then they do things that you're like, I don't know about that. But if you respect that choice,
and accept it.
And more than accept it, but just, take it to heart and realize that it's real and that basically you can't change it. So don't even try, just learn to realize, like her mom, that that's the right choice for her, So, like, we love music, and we tried to get her to play music. And she's a natural. It was unbelievable. She'd sit down at the piano. She could pick out the tune. She wanted to get a dog, and we were like, I don't know, and we made this deal with her. We'll get a dog, but we want you to try playing music. And my brother-in-law is a pretty good guitar player, and he was... we had a family gathering, and he was encouraging her to play the drums, which we were not real excited about. And she's like, can I play the drums? And I went, well, we'll see about that. But right now, I can show you how to play the guitar, because we have guitars. And we sat down one night, and when she agreed, and showed her some chords.
She even wrote a song.
And she had like 12 songs by the end of the night. And she's like, oh, it hurts my fingers, which it does when you first start. But within no time, she was strumming the chords and singing songs. But she never loved it the way we do. And I think really what it was is her friends weren't that into it. For a little while, one friend was like, oh, yeah, let's have a punk band, And they got this little band together. And there was a guy in town that did like rock school. And so for a little while, they were like together, but the other kids weren't that into it. And so she didn't do it.
Yeah.
well, she decided she wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
And we're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But I see it. It's creativity.
It's creative.
And it's what she loves. She loves reading. She loves making up stories. So I can't tell her that's
Not appropriate.
not, it's like, yeah, go for it, you know? So it definitely gets easier the older they get,
For sure. But I think the secret is bridging the gap.
Sure.
Is wanting to continually build a bridge. I think even in a partnership, it's about consistently making an effort to build the bridge between the two of you.
Right.
Because there are difficult times.
Right.
I know,
sure.
when she was a teenager, probably she gave you a
Right.
hard time.
That was the time we had difficulty.
Right.
And I did as well.
And like Sharon said about her mom, I mean, I'll just bring it back around. It's like, respect their choices,
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's a child or your partner, or even just the people that you associate with, it's like, you may not like everything they do, but just accept and embrace that we're all different.
And that they're a different person than you.
Yeah.
They're separate from you.
And you've developed whatever your interests and desires are through the life you live, and everybody lives a different life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What made you decide to have a daughter?
Oh, man. Sharon was a Head Start teacher.
And actually, one of my goals in being a Head Start teacher was to learn how to be a mom, to learn more about kids and to learn what their needs were and all that. Well, so I went and I was a Head Start teacher for a while. And what it really taught me was, oh my God, what a responsibility. And what if I have one of these kids that are so difficult to manage? And so it made me not want to have kids, which is one of the reasons I never had kids with my first husband.
Oh, interesting.
And then when I met Dave, that was one of the things he really wanted. And that was a tough one for me. We went to counseling around it.
Well, and my desire to have a kid, I never really thought about it that much when I was younger.
Uh-huh.
But my dad went in for heart surgery when he was 70, got an artificial heart valve. And we all gathered as he was going into surgery. And I remember him, I mean, he was kind of a funny guy. He goes, well, if I don't see you again, and oh, man, And then I had this friend, an older guy that was my dad's age, who used to come visit me in my shop because he just loved what I was doing, and we became pals kind of. And he would, whenever he was in town, he'd come by and tell me stories, and I just loved it. It was great. But he had no family, and he had the same problem that my dad had, and he had to go through that alone. And I saw that and I was like, man, and this is totally selfish, but when I'm old, I do not want to have to go through something like that alone. And it made me think about, do I want to have kids or not? And that was something we had to talk about, and it was like, I remember coming back from, luckily my dad made it through the surgery, and he actually lived another 20 years with that artificial heart valve. And, but I remember coming back and saying, Sharon, we get along great. And we have so much compatibility. And I know you've said that you don't want to have kids, but I really want you to rethink that, because and what I said to her was, I don't want to miss out on that experience. And it's kind of funny, talk about respecting people's choices. Our daughter is dead set against having kids.
Same with
There
mine.
is no way.
Yep.
And at first, I was like, oh, that's too bad.
Well, my mother really struggles with it. She's like, well, maybe you'll change your mind.
Well, and that's, my brother, every time I talk to him, oh, you never know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, Bill, I know. and
She's been pretty clear.
And honestly, I
Pretty
totally accept it. And,
So do I.
And
However,
I'm actually kind of glad.
Yeah.
Because, like in today's environment,
this is
it's
a
like
hard world.
It
it's
is
like,
a
you know,
really difficult world.
if
to
you
bring
don't want to
baby
raise a
in.
kid,
Please
don't do it.
It's
There-
so
we
much
have,
work.
and we have enough people.
We do.
There are definitely enough people.
There
and,
are definitely enough people having babies.
Yeah.
That may or may not even want
Yeah.
them.
Right. And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then, on top of that is through our business of making instruments, we have done well, and she's set to have a nice inheritance. I don't think we'll burn through it all. And I don't have to worry
Yeah.
about her burning through it.
Yeah.
It's like, go ahead.
Yeah.
And just to contrast, my brother has 3 kids. He's got 7 grandkids. He is thinking family legacy all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think about that.
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
hey, Rosie will be okay.
Yeah.
I feel very confident she will be
Yeah,
okay.
okay. And
And
you
I don't have to worry about
it.
another generation, because
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
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 So through counseling, I was able to go through whatever fears I had around it. And I am so glad we had her. It was so much fun.
And she was an easy kid.
She was.
She was a really easy kid.
Yeah.
And
So it was all good.
like the hardest thing we ever went through
Those teenagers.
it was a brief. Well, it was it was pretty a traumatic experience she had, and it took a lot for us to. It took a lot for me to understand and then figure out what to do, and it turned out okay, and it lasted a couple weeks. It was just like, it was just a moment really in the big picture.
Okay, we answered so many of these, so let me just look. What's the most exciting thing that you've ever done, and what was the best part of it?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind was our trip to Cuba.
Oh, wow. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
What came to your mind?
Oh, I really didn't have time to think it. Exciting. I think some of the recording sessions that we did with the swing beans,
sure. That was
getting
fun.
into the record, because again, we're passionate about music.
Yeah.
We are what I call passionate amateurs. Never really even considered the notion of trying to make a living at it, because
Right.
I know how hard it is.
It is.
And I feel blessed to have a life in music without having to rely on it,
Right.
on the performance
Aspect
of it.
Yeah.
But when we got this group together, the Swing Beans, we had this violin player who had gone to the Berklee School of Music in Boston and was really good. We had a guitar player who was super, he was a great blues singer, a good guitar player, and he was funnier than heck. And so he was our front man. And right away, the violin player says, we need to get into the recording studio, which was something we had never done in a real pro recording studio.
Do you still have the recordings?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
We can get them to you if you want to listen.
That's awesome.
but when you go in there, and first of all, it's a really there's a sensation in that room. They line the walls with cork. You can smell the cork. And anytime I smell that, I think, oh yeah, man, that was fun. And then they put the headphones on you, and they've got this reverb machine that says Carnegie Hall. And you play, and it just sounds great. And then, you're with your buddies playing this music that you've worked on, and it just sounds so wonderful, like way better than you think
it's ever going to sound.
Yeah, and then you have this ability. if you make a mistake, you can fix it.
Uh-huh.
And so you come out, so that process for me
loved that part.
it was just so, like you used the word exciting. It was exciting.
Yeah.
And, you sit there on the couch in the control room and you listen to, like I listening to my friend Lentil Bean do his guitar solo, and then, and it just comes alive, and you're like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah,
so that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, recording is really cool. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I still love doing it. Don't get to do it enough, but yeah.
What did you love about Cuba?
The music.
Aha.
We came home with 11 CDs and saw so many good things, so many good musical groups.
That's awesome.
Yeah. As a tourist, I mean, what an opportunity. I mean, Cuba's been closed to Americans for a long time.
Yeah.
And during the Obama years, they allowed us to go there as tourists. And people from every other country in the world can go there. So there is a tourist industry.
Yeah.
And every little restaurant that we would go to, there'd be a bunch of guys sitting around just waiting, and they're playing for tips. But the economy there is so messed up that a doctor makes like $20 a month, and so does everybody else. Mm-hmm. And these musicians are making really good money every day off the tourists. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how much of that they get to keep or whatever, but the first night we go to this restaurant, little band starts playing this music. The style is called son. And if you've ever heard the Buena Vista Social Club record that Ry Cooder did, that's son. And there's a traditional repertoire, and there's traditional instruments they play. And everywhere we went, there were these little son bands, and they're playing for tips. And they are some of the happiest people in the country because they're actually making some real money. And then we discovered if you don't tip them, they don't play. And so every time if they had a CD, I bought it, Yeah. It was
fun.
It was a good trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you traveled much in the world?
Not a lot.
Okay.
After we had been involved with each other, or whatever you want to call it, dating.
For a year.
For like a year, she went home to visit her parents for Christmas, and the holidays because they're Jewish. And she came back and said, "Oh, my cousin Rochelle went to Europe. I want to go to Europe." And I went, "Well, have a good time," because it didn't really sound like an invitation. She goes, "Oh no, I want you to go too." So we went on this trip to Europe together, where we took our bicycles and toured all over Europe with a Eurail pass.
Did you?
And
that was really fun.
And we brought, I made a little tiny guitar and had a mandolin, and we would panhandle, and actually got busted in Spain for doing that. But you'd meet people. And this is the great thing about, again, keep coming back to music, but
yes.
It's a big part of our lives.
It's been a humongous part of your
the
lives.
thing is, what we've found is it opens up conversations like with you. We would have never, we would have said hi. Brighton Bush is a really friendly place.
Exactly.
But we wouldn't be sitting here today.
Right.
Anyway, so we were in Spain, and the police said, "You can't do that." And these German guys who were watching us,
I'm sorry,
invited us over to their table, bought us a beer, and said, "Well, you should come visit us in Germany." So we did. We had like a week in between. We did something, went to Italy or something, and then up to Germany and hung out with them for the weekend, and it just kept happening.
Yeah,
it opens doors.
Yes.
It opens up conversation, and that's something that we really love.
Yeah. It's been a huge part of your relationship and partnership.
Yes.
Yeah, you bet.
Mm-hmm. How are we going to end this? Let's see. How can we incorporate more love into our lives?
Be around the people you love.
Aww.
Well, and I think, love the one you're with, love the people that are around you, and be compassionate, be understanding. And, I have to say it probably was a hard thing for me. I know my dad, the one criticism that I would level at him is he didn't have a lot of understanding for people who were different than him. I can't understand why anybody would blah, 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 blah. And there are things in life that it's really hard to understand. Why is that person way?
For sure.
And you don't have to know why. If you can accept that they are different and that they have different values or different needs, beliefs, that's the tough one for me. I did inherit my dad's sense of logic, so doesn't always make sense.
Yeah.
But let people be who they are and try to find what it is there that you do appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Look for something to love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. Thank you, Dave. Thank you both for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Yeah.